Welcome. Thank you. My name is Oliver Heath. I'm an architectural and interior designer. Thank you for the introduction. And I guess, some of you might be wondering what a designer, particularly somebody who's involved in the world of, the fluffy world of TV design and the likes of BBC changing rooms, might be able to tell you, the good and the great of the FM world, about how to run buildings better. Well, I guess ultimately, my fundamental question is, what is a successful, sustainable building? And a lot of my work over the last 25 years has really been about investigating what a sustainable building might be, how we actually kind of work it into the fabric of the building, what that means in terms of the products, the materials, the way the building runs and it functions. But also a really key question is why somebody might choose to opt for a sustainable building. And of course, over the last 25 years, we've gone from people being quite resistant and only seeing these things in a short-term set of costs. Well, I would be more sustainable, but it's going to cost me more. We haven't got the budget. To suddenly going to a point where we're going, actually, can we afford not to be sustainable? What does that say about us as an organization? And today, really, what I'm going to be talking to you about is how those ideas and that way of thinking is really transferring away from this carbon-centric conversation into a new frontier in sustainable design, one that's really much more human-centered. And to prove that point, and to prove why that is so valuable, I'd like to show you, I haven't got many graphs in my presentation, so it does get even more inspirational than this. This is a chart by the World Green Building Council. It came out a couple of years ago. Now, over the last 30 years, when we've talked about sustainability, we've talked about primarily this carbon-centric conversation. How can I mitigate my carbon emissions in the materials and in the way the building functions? Now, in reality, for me as a designer, I've been trying to promote this to businesses and homeowners. Reality is that energy, gas and electricity, potentially water as well, only represents 1% of typical business operating costs. So of course it's going to be a difficult conversation for me to try and convince somebody that the additional costs at the front end are going to be worth it later on, because in the reality the payback period on that is a relatively long time. But what this chart so beautifully demonstrates, really, as well, what I really like about it is that is almost a chart of Canary Wharf, which is literally over there. So that's kind of nice. Quite rare that happens. What this chart so neatly demonstrates is that actually 90% of typical business operating costs are in staff salaries and benefits. So what I'm saying to you here is that yes, this carbon-centric conversation is absolutely essential. Of course, we have to do more to reduce our impact on the planet through the carbon use, but also there's a human-centered side to sustainability that offers tangible financial benefits to my clients, to your bosses, to the businesses that we all work for, because 90% of typical business operating costs are in those staff salaries. So if we take this human-centered benefit, human-centered approach, then we can start to realize these tangible financial benefits. So what I'm going to be doing today is really talking to you about this new human-centered side of design that really focuses on health and well-being and demonstrates the enormous benefits that can be investigated when we understand that health and well-being, and in particular stress, is incredibly damaging to the functionality of the buildings that we're living and working in. So why is health and well-being rising up the agenda? Well, for all sorts of reasons. The World Health Organization states that stress-related conditions of cardiovascular disease and mental health issues are likely to be the two prime contributing factors to illness by 2020. And in this survey that came out last year in 2016, stress accounted for 37% of all work-related ill health and 45% of all days lost. So, stress is costing people a lot of money. On top of that, we are becoming increasingly urbanized. Can I just ask you, put your hands up, how many people here would say they live in an urban or semi-urban area? Could you just put your hands up, enough for everybody to see? So that is kind of more or less at least 90%. Okay, that's good, the figures are right. So, we're living in a very, very urbanized country. We spend an inordinate amount of time indoors, and very rarely do we get to work indoors in such an amazing space. Generally, we're working indoors in dark, cramped conditions. We spend 90% of our time indoors. And also we had this massive proliferation of mobile technology. And if you think back, I don't know, 15 years ago, when we were sitting at computers, we'd be working, and when we turned around, we might have the opportunity to gaze out the window, to relax, to recuperate, to restore our mental and physical energy. Now what's likely to happen is you turn away from your computer and you'll go onto a laptop or a tablet or your phone, you'll be looking at social media, the news, answering WhatsApp messages. You know, we're always on. We don't give ourselves the opportunity just to switch off and to recuperate our mental and physical energy. And that is really, really important. And there's lots and lots of research. What's interesting about this approach to design by using biophilic design is it's what we call an evidence-based approach. So it takes up and considers some of the research that's happened over the last 35 years that demonstrates that when we improve this human connection to nature, we can reduce stress, and by reducing stress, we can also aid recuperation. Now, in this one particular study, office workers were found to perform 10 to 25% better in mental recall and mental functioning when they had the best possible views as opposed to the worst. So what does that mean? Well, doing simple things like rearranging desks, being closer to windows, means that when you sit or stand here, obviously there's a lot more natural light falling onto me. I get a better view, I get a greater exposure to natural light than if I'm sitting 8 meters away. So the arrangement of desks and spaces is critical. In this particular study, productivity was seen to be improved by 15% when plants and greenery were introduced. So what's important is that we don't see these fluffy things like plants as being an unnecessary extra, that when we look down the spreadsheet, it's not an extra cost, but there is a tangible financial benefit to keeping and retaining plants in those spreadsheets for the people working in those buildings. And in this one particular study, when natural features have been applied, there's a 15% reduction in absenteeism. So again, those fluffy, designery things, they're not just a waste of money. It's about reducing costs and improving the outcomes of the buildings that are so important to our lives. So that's a little bit of the research. What I want to do is just kind of take you back a bit and explain to you what biophilic design is and where it comes from. Okay, so I just do a little kind of interactive test here. I'm going to ask you to shut your eyes, actually. I know it's first thing in the morning. If you do appear to keep your eyes closed, at the end of it, I will have somebody prod you and wake you up. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, if that's okay. I want you to imagine that the FM world has been so good to you, and you've earned so much that money is suddenly no object. Forget that, no. You've won the lottery, because maybe there's more chance of that, okay? Okay, so imagine you played the lottery, and that amazing day has come, and you've won the lottery, and I'm sure, after, like me, you've watched grand designs, you've often dreamt about building your own dream home. So I want you to imagine you've got to this point, you're going to build your own dream home, and after many months of working with the builders and the planners, that amazing day has come. You've been handed the keys, and I want you to picture yourself walking into your dream home, walk to the window, and just imagine what it is that you see. Okay, you got a picture of that? Okay, now put your hands up if you see any of the following things. A large body of water, it could be a river, it could be the sea. Put your hands up nice and clear if you've seen anything like that. Trees or greenery, possibly mountains. Keep your hands up if you've seen these things. Okay, probably worth you opening your eyes and looking around you. If you've seen any of those things, just look around you. Okay, you'll see that nearly everybody has an aspiration to be in or closer to connection to nature. So it's kind of a weird thing that although a majority of us, 90%, already live in an urban environment, we do aspire to be in closer connection to nature and natural systems. Now, the reason I believe for this is in biophilia. Biophilia means love of nature, and it's a term that was first popularized by the American psychologist Edward O. Wilson in the 1980s, when he recognized society's departure away from rural dwelling and into city centers, and the many psychological and physiological problems that started to bring. So biophilic design is really how we use these ideas to create a set of design principles to improve that connection to nature as a means to cut costs and to improve outcomes in buildings. The reason for this is, for 99.9% of our human evolution, we've lived in very, very close proximity to nature. It's been fundamental to our survival. So many of the scenes that you see here are still fundamental to our appreciation of what constitutes a good space to work in. And because of that, we have this idea. This is the Savanna Theory. Now what this does is it suggests that we have a genetic inheritance that allows us to very quickly recognize landscapes that can help us to survive, thrive, and flourish. And many of the things you see here, while it's not always possible in the built environment, are the things that can suggest a healthy environment. That when we look down onto spaces with a sense of safety and prospect, we look onto green spaces, because green suggests life, and because of this greenery, we have the potential for prey. We have the potential for food, wood for burning, we can see potential for vegetables and fruit, we've got water, lots of natural light. All of these things are key aspects that are fundamental and important to biophilic design, and to creating spaces that immediately suggest to people walking into your buildings that this is a space that can help life survive, thrive, and flourish. And of course those words are important, particularly when you're trying to attract the best new talent coming out of university. It's about that first impression. So, biophilic design, there are three core constructs. The first is in that direct connection with nature, the things that are obvious. People think biophilic design, loads of plants. Of course, that is a fundamental and probably the quickest way to help people reduce stress is by that connection to nature. Because when we look at nature, it actually reduces our blood pressure and our heart rates. It helps us to be better and to reduce stress. But of course, many of the spaces that we now occupy simply don't have that connection to nature. So it's in what we call natural analogues as the second one. This is how we mimic elements of nature using natural materials, colours, textures and patterns and technologies. And lastly, and most importantly, it's about humans. Remembering that we are actually, this is almost ridiculous for me to have to even say that, we're part of nature. Yeah, we are part of that. So finding ways of allowing people to be closer to nature is really important. Both the direct connection to nature or the indirect if we don't have those real forms. And what this allows us to do is to create spaces that are energizing and stimulating and aspirational. It makes you want to walk in and go, I love this space, I could spend my day here. But by contrast, recognizing that as human beings, we all need a space to sit and relax and recuperate. So creating these calming and restorative spaces, and that's what nature can bring you. So just to delve into it a little bit more, we have what's called the 14 Patterns of Biophilic Design, and this is an idea that was set up to help us understand biophilic design a little bit better. So on the left-hand side, you've got a greater understanding of those elements of the direct connection to nature, the real forms of nature that we can sense. In the yellow, we've got the indirect elements, which are the kind of natural materials, textures, patterns, and technologies. And thirdly, we've got the human spatial response. Now, if you'd like to know more about that in more detail, because I haven't got very long today, you can pick up one of these. It's the 14 Patterns of Biophilic Design if you go over to the interface stand just over there. Now, as I mentioned, there are all sorts of studies that have happened over the last 35 years that demonstrate how important nature is to creating a happy, healthy, and stress-free environment. In this one particular study, in education spaces, children were found to learn 20 to 25% faster when learning in natural daylight. Absenteeism from school can be reduced by 3.5 days per year, and test results can be improved by 5 to 14%. That sounds obvious, but if children have a better experience of learning from an earlier age, they're more likely to go up into further education. So of course what that means is the child gets a better level, more consistent level of education, and of course that's good for the education system on the whole. But when that knowledge then starts to spread into the national economy, then actually everybody starts to benefit. So investing in education is really, really important, and making sure we've got really positive nature-filled environments. In this one particular study by the Green Business Council, decision-making is found to be improved by 11 to 23% better when there are reduced levels of CO2. Now, what's fantastic about plants is not only, do they look great and everybody likes plants, because we've all had a positive experience of nature at some point in our lives. Plants can also do all sorts of other things. A NASA study revealed that actually many different plants can actually remove toxins from our environments. They're also good for reducing heart rates and blood pressure levels. When we introduce things like green walls, it can help to modify temperature and humidity imbalances that happen throughout the day. It can also reduce CO2 and release oxygen. So introducing greenery and nature is good in all sorts of physical aspects to our built environment. In this one particular study, What they found was that in classrooms that have timber walls, students' heart rates could actually be reduced by 8,600 beats per day. So simply putting natural materials into the built environment in that idea of using indirect references to nature can improve the experience by relaxing people. And of course, when you introduce soft and natural materials, it has the potential to improve acoustics, meaning that teachers don't have to shout and students can hear. And as a result, lower heart rates, lower blood pressure levels, everybody wins. And in this last particular study, in this study by the UTS University in Sydney, stress levels were actually reduced by 30 to 60% when plants were introduced. Like I said, everybody's had a positive experience of nature at some point, at some level. And so we relate to it very well. And plants and nature are very, very good at helping us to reduce stress and improve recuperation rates. Now, this is a little film. This is a film of a project that we recently completed. It's probably the smallest project we completed this year, but undeniably the most valuable. And what it demonstrates is that biophilic design is not necessarily about filling spaces with nature. It's about recognizing the many opportunities to reduce stress and aid recuperation by thinking and taking a human-centered approach. So this is about a project we did at a special needs school for autistic children just up the road here in Hackney. Biophilic design is a set of principles that can be used to improve the human connection to nature in the buildings that we live and work in. The brief for the design of this room was really that the children experience a lot of stress when they're in the playground. There's nowhere for them to retreat to. There's noise, there's confusion, there is activity, and the children were just getting overwhelmed. So we were asked to come into the garden school and to create a space that would be calming and restorative and help them to recuperate, to enjoy looking out onto the playground without feeling that they were going to be surrounded and overwhelmed by that noise and that activity.
I've seen in my experience working with them that they love to go outside and they love to learn by exploring different materials, and so to see them come in here and identify on a sensory level with the different features that are in the space was really exciting, and it's evident their enjoyment interacting with the space and using the different features.
Because we haven't got the opportunity to introduce real direct forms of nature into the space, the use of indirect elements of nature has been absolutely vital to create that natural feeling to the room. So we've used interfaces, carpet tiles across the floor, which introduce natural colours and textures, the greens, the different pile heights. Added to that, these cubicles uses interfaces net effect carpet tiles. And interestingly, the colour blue is long associated with a sense of calm and relaxation. So these little spaces are areas where the children can just tuck themselves in to retreat from the rest of the world. It even changes the acoustics when they're sitting inside them. And this amazing sense of calm and relaxation starts to happen.
The first time we came into the space, they went directly into these hexagonal cocoon-like shapes, and there's one particular child who every time she's come in, she goes into that space, and this is a child who actually seeks small, confined, dark spaces, so it was fantastic to see her immediately find something that fulfilled her need.
Simply putting window seats next to windows mean that when children sit and gaze out onto the playground, they're sitting in the space where they can maximise their exposure to natural light inside. But when the lights go down outside, we've got artificial lights within the space. We've used dimmable LED lights so they can control the lighting levels. And in the interactive feature, we've got different color changing levels of light. So when they press an interactive feature, lights change and noises come out of the speakers and the amplifier. There's all sorts of ways that biophilic design can be introduced into education spaces. It's not about spending lots of money. It's simply understanding and recognizing the opportunities that we have as designers to improve that connection to nature, be it a direct connection, be it indirect in the use of materials, but also understanding our human spatial needs of the spaces that we're living and working in. There you go, biophilic design, much more than just filling a space with loads of plants. Now, it's really in the workplace that we can most accurately measure the benefits of biophilic design, and my own design company is about to embark on a project with the CRE at the moment where we will be taking a whole floor of an office building in their campus in Watford and converting it into a series of different biophilic zones to investigate and study and measure over a 2.5-year period the real benefits of different elements of nature. Where we believe what it does is to alleviate stress, reduce absenteeism, so cut costs, but also to improve outcomes by improving productivity and staff retention. And there's an interesting idea called the attention restoration theory that suggests that actually we have two types of attention. We have directed attention, which is what we have when we look at a computer screen. It's what we need to focus and to complete tasks. And we know we can do this, but it is tiring physically and mentally. And so by contrast, what we also have is effortless forms of attention. And this is the wonderful sense of calm and relaxation when we look out onto areas of nature and we see ripples moving across a pool of water or rippling leaves in a tree. So what we really need to be doing is to think about combining these two things, to create working spaces that have a direct connection to nature, to create micro-recuperative spaces, allowing people to work better for longer with less stress. Now, a couple of years ago, Interface, the carpet manufacturers, carried out a really extensive global survey. What they did is they surveyed 7,600 office workers over 16 different countries. And what they found was that 85% of office workers now work in urban areas, similar to the level of urbanization in the UK. So as a result, inevitably have a reduced connection to nature. What they found was kind of quite shocking. And these are the global figures. The figures in the UK are much higher and worse. So what they found was that 47% of people had no natural light at their desks and 58% had no access to plants. And we've discussed just how important these two elements are. What was it that people said they wanted? Well, 44% of people said natural light was fundamental to their workplace, 20% said indoor plants, quiet working spaces are important, 17% of people were just plain greedy and wanted a view of the sea, and 15% of people cited that bright colours were really important, and very often cited the colours that we find in lush, healthy, savanna-like environments as being the colours that can calm and relax and recuperate or invigorate and inspire and energise people. And the results, what happens when we introduce elements of nature into the built environment? Well, people self-report a 15% higher level of well-being. That's people recognising in themselves, and I think that's kind of amazing. And as a result, they're likely to be more engaged, more focused, and as a result, 6% more productive and 15% more creative. So this is really interesting that we can take a design approach that's an evidence-based approach, and we can use this evidence quite literally, because you can go and pick up a copy of this Biophilic Design in the workplace report over there, the interface report, and you can show this to your bosses and say, look, if we take this approach, not only can we get beautiful spaces that appeal to nearly everybody, because everyone's had a positive experience of nature, but we can also benefit from improved productivity, reduced absenteeism. In a way, everybody wins. Fantastic. So where's this all going? What's the future of health and well-being in the built environment? Well, it might be this, the well building standard. Can you just put your hands up? How many people here have heard of the well building standard? Nearly everybody. About 50% actually. Okay, so we know about the building standards in the UK. We know that we've got BREEAM and LEED, and these are really constructional building standards. They involve the design process and the construction, LEED and BREEAM. What we've now got is the well building standard that exists between the construction period and thereafter, the occupation of the building. Now, the well building standard was founded by Delos back in 2013, so it's only been out 3 or 4 years, and it's now regulated by the IWBI, the International Well Building Institute. And the well building standard really focuses on measuring and the performance of health and well-being in buildings. And there are 3 standards. We've got the silver, the gold, and the platinum. And really what happens is that it kind of follows the design process, and hopefully what you do is you work with a WELL AP, an accredited professional, to integrate aspects that will be beneficial to WELL and to the final occupants, and then the building gets accredited and certified. And what's interesting about it is that it's not then certified forever. The building has to undergo regular maintenance. You need to demonstrate that, and of course after 3 years you then have to get recertified to demonstrate the building is still a fit and healthy and happy place to work. There are 7 key features to the well building standard. which make up 105 preconditions, optimizations, and innovations. Now, to get to the silver standard, you need all the preconditions, and then to get to the to reach the gold and the platinum level, which you really want to be doing, you want to be getting using the optimizations and some of the innovations. There are 7 key features, including aspects to do with air, water, food, light, fitness, being agile and walking through the building, comfort, which is really the physical comfort, and mind, which is the psychological comfort within the space. And within the mind aspect is a feature including biophilic design. Just one little case study here. This is one of the recently completed well-building gold standards by Cundall's, quite near here in One Carter Lane. They're a company of engineers. They completed this building in 2016. It was a 1,500 square metre refurbishment project of a value of £850,000. Now, what they found after completing the WELL Gold Standard and getting that certification was that the costs attributed to WELL were £55,000. So what they calculated was that the additional construction costs were only really 1 to 3%, depending at which point you introduce WELL into the construction and design process. However, that only represents really £200 per building occupant. So really it's incredibly good value, particularly when you consider the benefits that they've since experienced, which is a 50% lower rate of absenteeism, resulting for Cundall's in a £90,000 saving, and a 27% drop in staff turnover, saving £122,000. So a total level of benefits of over £200,000 because of their investment of £55,000. So not only is it good for building occupants, it's of course great for the financial returns and the delivery of a better building to work in. And how do we do that? Well, it's all to do with collaboration. It's not just about coming from me as a designer, it's about coming from you as the facilities managers, human resources, chief financial operating officers. Everybody's got to get together and have this collaborative process to understand that to create better buildings, yes, we need to be carbon-centric, but we also need to be human-centered, and recognizing that in a way, everybody benefits when we take this kind of dual approach. It's good for me because I get to offer an increased level of services with improved outcomes. It's good for my clients because they're the ones that truly benefit from this human-centered approach and the tangible financial returns. And of course, it's good for building occupants as well because they're the ones that get to experience a better live-work balance. And of course, those at the very vanguard of workplace design are doing all they can to incorporate biophilic element because it's great for the war for talent and attracting the best new talent away from university to come and work here. It's good for retaining staff and getting them to be more productive and obviously to stop them leaving. This is actually Google's Mountain View campus proposal by Thomas Heatherwick and partners. So a fantastic level of nature being incorporated into the space. And of course, your companies and your clients don't need to do this. They don't need to take a human-centered approach. Thing is that your competition might be. They're going to be creating spaces that welcome people in, that create aspirational spaces that are good for people, that encourage people to go and work there as opposed to dark, windowless offices. Now, lots of the research I've been talking about today can be found on this website. This is humanspaces.com. It's a compendium of information and research on health and well-being in the built environment and biophilic design. Lots of designers and architects and psychologists submitting articles, so do go and take a look at that. And if you've had a positive experience of nature being incorporated into buildings, do submit a blog article on that. Biophilic design is much more than this year's must-have trend. It's more than shoving a whole load of plants in or bringing the outside in. It's about creating a stronger, deeper connection to nature and natural processes as a means to cut costs and to improve outcomes, because nature is fantastic for all of us at reducing stress and aiding mental and physical recuperation. Biophilic design is an essential component in the creation of happier and healthier places to live and work. It's better for people, it's better for productivity, and it's better for the planet. Thank you very much.